Okay, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Supports for the Clinical Innovation Award. And today I am delighted to be joined by Sarusha Pillay. Sarusha is the commercial lead for FetalSafe, which is an Enterprise Ireland Commercialisation Fund down in UCC. Hi, Sarusha.
Hi, Stephen, and thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, no, thanks for joining us. As you know, the Clinical Innovation Award is open to clinical personnel who have an idea for a technology or a solution for an unmet need in healthcare, and these are kind of for those big ticket items like a medical device or something which you are quite familiar with. So I'd like you to introduce yourself and your experience in this area.
Sure. My name is Sarusha Pillay, and I am the commercial lead for a project called FetalSafe, and that is hosted at the Infant Research Centre at the University College Cork. And FetalSafe really is a device to be used in labouring mothers who go into labour up until the time the baby is born. And the device aims to monitor the fetus during this process and to detect any fetal distress. And this is to prevent incidences of fetal hypoxia, which can lead to brain seizures and brain damage and injury. Some of the ways this manifests in pediatrics and adults is cerebral palsy. Very often, if doctors don't pick up fetal hypoxia earlier on in the laboring process, they rush to C-sections. In some cases, this is very unwarranted. So globally, 33% of C-sections that are conducted are unnecessary and unwarranted. And so we want to be able to offset that by allowing mothers to have a natural, healthy birth with their babies and not to suffer the adverse effects of unnecessary surgery.
Wow, 33% or C-sections are unnecessary. That is, and I mean, it is surgery, so it's invasive and comes with it the associated traumas. Yeah.
And very interestingly, Stephen, if you convert that to the cost burden in hospitals, in the US alone, you're looking at offsetting a cost burden of $1.8 billion.
Wow. And this is something where you've kind of already mentioned the clinical need, and also that there is a commercial need. There's a huge amount of money being spent to address this problem as it is.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, just to give people who are listening to us a sense of how important this is. Obstetrics is one of the most litigated against professions. It's one of the top 5 most litigated against professions in the world, and there's a lot of litigation settlements of parents who obviously litigate against hospitals and obstetricians, and this alone exceeds $3 billion globally. So if we solve this problem at a very early stage, at the start of life, we're hoping to offset, adverse clinical outcomes, cost burdens on health systems and providers. And all that money that can be saved can then be pumped back into the health system to improve the standard of care across all different disciplines.
Yeah, and I mean, even from a stakeholder's perspective, a lot of people mightn't have considered that the healthcare systems themselves, but when they're dealing with these legal cases, that is a huge cost, and that funding could very well, had there not been any reason for them to be sued or litigated against, could be reinvested in healthcare itself.
Exactly. So very often when one looks at an unmet clinical need, one needs to look broader than just the clinical outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And you have to look at the big picture and how one thing leads to the next and what the impacts of that is. And I think that's what made our case very appealing to Enterprise Ireland to fund, is that it's holistic in nature and it impacts a lot of touch points.
And you said another thing, and I do have a set questions we'll get to, is how, if you can address a problem earlier in its life cycle, that that's where you can maximize the benefit.
Absolutely.
Okay, Sarusha, so you're quite busy. So would you mind telling us how you became the commercial lead for this project?
Yeah, so a little bit of my background. I'm South African, and I actually am a pharmacist. That's my undergrad degree. And I worked for quite a few multinationals in the early part of my career, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Cipla MedPro. And then I did my MBA, and I actually worked for an enterprise development agency, very similar to Enterprise Ireland in South Africa, where we identified projects and SMEs for STEM projects, and we'd help support them through funding and enabling activities. So very aligned to the innovation ecosystem here in Ireland. And then I really wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to become an entrepreneur myself. And I sort of like looked at the global landscape. And to be fair to Ireland, Ireland's one of the best medtech hubs and clusters globally. And so I thought, well, I'd really like to be part of this ecosystem. And so I looked at how I could do that. And I entered Ireland through the BioInnovate program, which is a medtech entrepreneur development program at NUIG. It is funded by Enterprise Ireland, and it's a 10-month program. And you are in multidisciplinary teams. You get a thematic area, and you identify an unmet clinical need. And they really teach you the biodesign process. And it's strongly affiliated to the Stanford Biodesign program in the US. And that's how I entered the Irish innovation ecosystem. And then I very quickly pivoted in the program to focus on women's health, because that's where my passion lies. And I really wanted to make a difference. And I started investigating areas to consider in women's health. I looked at gynecology areas, I looked at obstetrics areas. And in doing so, and through my research, I actually met an obstetrician in Cork, Dr. Fergus McCarthy, and he is at CUMH there. And Fergus had identified very early on in his career the opportunity to solve fetal hypoxia during labor. So we collaborated during my BioInnovate years, and we put in a follow-on funding application to Enterprise Ireland. And we were very happy to receive an award from them for our proof of concept. And that's how I became the commercial lead for FetalSafe, through entering BioInnovate, meeting Fergus, and putting in an application. So yeah, it's been quite a successful journey. I've been here 2 years now, and I'm absolutely loving the innovation ecosystem in Ireland.
It's a fantastic story, and we might dive into a little bit more about the team with yourself and Fergus and that. But first, I just want to comment on something. You came over, you got into you did the BioInnovate program. You're a fellow, and then you went into another Enterprise Ireland support. Can you comment on kind of that ecosystem that?
Yeah, so it was quite a smooth transition, really. So Enterprise Ireland sort of funds quite a few of these programs throughout the island, and there's some sort of continuation between them. So the idea really is at a BioInnovate level to identify an unmet clinical need and validate it and create the business case around it. So all of those sort of learnings and teachings that I learned in that program helped me compile this business case and this opportunity to be funded. And there was a nice transition from BioInnovate into a com fund led by Enterprise Ireland. And so that's really great. And quite a few of my colleagues did similar proposals to Enterprise Ireland as well in other areas, and also was awarded com funds. And now they're on the same journey as I am, which is pretty amazing. And the intention, obviously, through a commercialization fund, which is hosted by an institution, is then to spin out of the university and to create a startup and to attract private equity funding, and then to be able to grow and scale that business into something that's successful for the country and to create jobs and to manufacture here.
And I mean, that's it's a brilliant goal. It's such a big goal. It's not a one-off small project. This is something that has global aspirations to get out there.
Absolutely. And the unmet clinical need can't just be for the local environment. You have to consider the entire global landscape. And so in looking at the business case and doing your customer validation, you have to reach out to other European countries, to the UK, to the US, and understand how broad and how severe this need actually is. So it really is a very big picture that one needs to consider. It's not just a local picture, because it's a long-term view. You want to create a company, you want to grow the company, and you want to make sales. So you need to be able to say how big is the global problem to be able to attract follow-on funding after you completed your tech development.
Yeah, and it's like that too. It's not a well, I suppose I'll call it a necessary evil because I lack the words to articulate what I really want to say. But you do have to make sales to fund the development of these technologies and these products so that they can get to where they need to be to deliver the benefits to those who need it most. And this is the process, and it's great to hear that there's such a I suppose a network and an ecosystem here in Ireland where you can come in with an idea through something like the Clinical Innovation Award, or you go into BioInnovate, and you can develop it through the Sports and Enterprise Ireland, Health Innovation Hub, Enterprise Ireland, etc., to grow it step by step and try and get you through
Yeah.
through to that startup.
And even in the project journey, there's a lot of enabling programs throughout Ireland that help you so that you're not alone. So you, as you can imagine, that you do have a very small team when you start, and everyone's got their distinct roles. But you need to tap into a broader peer network, and that's very important. So we have been able to leverage our programs such as the SFI Customer Discovery Program. That has led me to other programs in the US to do customer discovery. I've been able to participate and compete in the Ideate Ireland program, which is a business plan program. And that was amazing because it helped to accelerate our own thinking around our business and to better understand our business model and our business channels and how we'd actually be able to make a profit when we get to that point. And now that's led me to actually explore other options internationally. And we are currently competing for a clinical program called the Parkview program in Indiana, and that's linked to Matter, which is an incubator in Chicago. And you can see how this ripple effect sort of compounds your ability to maneuver quite organically, really, through the system. But it becomes such a big system, and that you meet people along your way that help you, and they help you identify things that are relevant for you. And so really the key for me has been to tap into the integrated network that Ireland has to offer and speak to people and make yourself visible, and don't be afraid to ask whatever seems like a silly question, because you probably, for every one silly question, have about 4 different answers, and they're probably all right. And if you put them all together, you kind of figure out what's right for you.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really good point. Yeah, you have to ask those questions because you know, if you don't know, you need to find out. And congratulations to you and FetalSafe for your success in Ideate Ireland recently. It's great. I'm going to move on here. You mentioned your comp fund, Fergus, down in CUMH, works with you. Can you talk me through your thoughts on a good team, and possibly I suppose you mentioned the peer support there in Ireland as well?
Yeah, so I think in innovation, you have to be able to place yourself in a multidisciplinary team, because no one knows everything about everything. So even in BioInnovate, we had key competencies in our team that we pulled together. So it was commercial competencies, it was clinical, and it was technical. And those are the pillars of innovation. And you have to be able to capacitate your direct team with those competencies, and you need to be able to leverage off each other. So myself, for example, I'm the commercial lead, but I rely very heavily on my team members to be able to fully understand the bigger problem and to fully understand the solution and how that solution is going to get to market. So I think being able to know what you need is important, but don't be afraid to be uncomfortable with the things that you do not know. Because in this journey, the more you find out, the less you will know. And that's been so true for me. the more I learn, the less I know. And sometimes I sit here and I go, well, what is it that I'm actually certain of? But it's actually kind of strange because it's kind of like an onion, right? So you start off in the beginning and you start off on a peripheral level and you start understanding your problem, your market, the players. And then the more you delve into it, the deeper you get. And the deeper you get, the less you know. But the less you know, the more you ask and the more you learn. And it's actually quite an incredible journey because I have had to become very comfortable with not knowing and become very comfortable with the things that I needed to ask. And a colleague of mine in UCC said, it takes a village to raise a startup. And that is such true words because outside your direct team, there's an indirect integrated network of people that you need to rely on and you need to trust and you need to access to be able to create the solution and take the solution to market because you don't know everything. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And very often I'm like, am I an imposter? Like, that imposter syndrome, it's a real thing. But you need to trust yourself and you need to trust that you understand your space and you need to trust the people around you to help you on your journey. And you need to make yourself vulnerable, I believe, because there's no point in pretending that you know everything because then you're never going to learn the things that you do not know. And innovation is a very humbling journey because you have to do that. You have to take a step back and say, well, fetal monitoring has never been a speciality of mine. It's not something that I've known my entire life. It's something I've had to learn. It's something that I've had to become familiar with. It's something that I've had to study. And you can only study so much, and the rest of it comes from the people around you.
Exactly, because you're committed to a role as well, and you can't, you don't have the bandwidth at the time to become an expert in all these other areas. You need to do what you're there to do, and trust and leverage the experience and expertise of your team members, and vice versa, so that you can move it forward. You mentioned there some of the qualities of an entrepreneur, or well, would you speak a little bit about that in your opinion? What are the qualities? What do you need to do to get into or what are the qualities you need to have, not have, but to maybe develop?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to know that it's not an easy journey, but it's certainly an exciting journey. And there's always going to be something new every single day. And every single day, you're going to find something that you do not know and something you're going to have to learn. And that never stops. And I feel like this is a long-term approach. It's like you buying a house and you're waiting to sell it in 20 years, and that's where you're going to make your return. So you need to gear yourself up for a long-term journey. And it's a relationship. It's like any other relationship with your co-founders and with your product and with your company. And you need to be tenacious. And I feel you need a lot of perseverance to be able to go through this journey, because there's always going to be like super ups and super downs. And you need to be able to understand that that is par for the course, and that you're not alone, that there's lots of entrepreneurs like you in Ireland and globally. And if you speak to all of them, they'll all tell you the same thing. And it's nice because there is a community out there. There is a peer network. So yeah, just to know that it's not a quick win. It's a long
and that's an important point as well, that it isn't an overnight success. They're very rare. This is something that you do work at, you persevere at, you keep pushing it forward, you get the best advice you can, you do your due diligence where you need to, and you develop, and you'll meet challenges along the way, and you'll adapt, or you'll pivot, you'll overcome them, and all the while you're progressing towards market and towards your ultimate goal of getting the product into hospitals and into maternity wards around the world. But yeah, it's like that. It's full on.
I said to someone the other day, startup journey, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle.
Fair enough.
you in this with your heart and soul and time, and the people around you are as much involved. Your families and friends become part of that journey with you. So it's certainly, it takes over, but it's a very rewarding journey.
Super. Sarusha, last question, and thank you so much for your time. What advice would you give to those thinking of applying for the Clinical Innovation Award?
Yeah, so Stephen, I think if someone is considering this journey, first of all, they got to know it's a long-term approach. But if I were them, I'd speak to as many people as I possibly can to understand what they're getting themselves into. I think you need to be aware of what this means in its entirety. So I think I had a soft landing with BioInnovate because they teach you what to expect, and you are within a peer network. Anyone coming into the clinical awards journey, to speak to other entrepreneurs, speak to other practitioners that have followed the same route to understand what their journeys was like. And also speak to people within the enabling environment like yourselves, like the TTOs, like the funders, because you'll get a different perspective from different people. And before you make that commitment, I think it's important to have all those different views that will help inform you. Because it's a big decision to make, right? You're leaving everything you know behind, and you're doing something completely different.
It is that's great advice. It is a big decision. What I'll say about the ecosystem in Ireland and having something like the Clinical Innovation Award or the Commercialisation Fund Feasibility Award, it's an opportunity for those of you who have an idea to test the waters, to make sure that there is that kind of pathway is there before you do commit. And I think that's hugely beneficial. That's getting real perspective on the problem before you launch into it. Because Sarusha, as you've described it, it is it's a passionate, somewhat all-consuming venture, because it is your life. You're pushing it forward all the time. So get on the best track. Use the resources around you. Speak to the right people. Speak to those who've gone before you. They'll talk to you.
And you're not alone. To be fair, there is so much goodwill in the innovation system. You can pretty much get anyone to speak to you at least once.
I think you, and we finish up here. You, I think we were presenting at something before for Spark Ignite, and I said offer somebody a cup of coffee, they'll probably talk to you, and you had a rebuttal to that.
Yeah, offer someone a pint, they'll come back.
Fantastic, Sarusha. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This video will be available on our YouTube channel along with other supports for the Clinical Innovation Award. So please go to our YouTube channel or visit our website at www.hih.ie and follow the links for the Clinical Innovation Award. Sarusha, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Stephen. Thank you very much. And good luck to everybody that's on this journey. And yeah, persevere.